Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. And this is the Agricultural Leaders Roundtable. We've got some good representatives here to talk about the key topic of agriculture. And don't forget, if you have the Hoove app, if you have some questions, please put it in there. We'll try to get some of those in this session as well. My name's Ken Day. I'm Director of Government and Public Affairs for the J.R. Simplot Company. We are a Boise, Idaho-based agribusiness company nearing our 100th anniversary, privately owned, privately held. If there's something in agriculture, we do it. We're a French fry company. We make fertilizer, everything across the board. But more importantly, we are an international company. And more importantly for this conference, with our Canadian friends and our U.S. friends, we do work in both countries. We have operations in both countries, and relationships are vitally important. And for many of us, for years, the border has pretty much been invisible. We've moved back and forth across the border and worked with our folks as we need to. But obviously, things have changed. So we will be talking about that a bit today with our panelists. I just want to thank my fellow co-chair, Minister Kasich, for moderating this panel discussion alongside me. And of course, I want to acknowledge all our speakers here today who have taken the time to be part of this roundtable discussion. I can guarantee you we'll have some meaningful conversation and some meaningful discussion in this session. And I also just want to thank the organizers of PNWER. Yesterday was fantastic. Every year we get some great panelists, and they work really hard to pull this together, really hard. So I just want to thank them again for another great conference, and obviously, hopefully more in the future. With that, I will pass it off to my co-chair.
Well, thanks, Ken. My name's Travis Kiesig. I'm the Minister of the Environment from the Government of Saskatchewan, and I'm also the incoming PNWER President. It's truly an honor to join Ken up here today with all of our esteemed panelists. In Saskatchewan, agriculture truly forms a part of the social fabric of our province. In 2024, our agricultural exports accounted for over 41% of total provincial gross domestic product. This isn't surprising, given that Saskatchewan is home to 60 million arable acres in Saskatchewan, which is over 43% of Canada's total farmland. We are recognized globally as a reliable, safe supplier of high-quality agri-food products. Saskatchewan has the food the world needs, and we will play an increasing role in ensuring global food security for decades to come. I'm looking forward to the discussion, and I'm certain that we will all gain some valuable insight from today's roundtable.
And as I mentioned, today we'll be talking about the key issues affecting agriculture in our region. And as I mentioned, we're facing some very challenging times, obviously, between the trade issues between U.S. and Canada. We'll be looking at the impact of trade policy on agriculture in our region and how the challenges brought about by these problems can be addressed. And we'll also take some time and look at some other specific challenges to agriculture that go beyond just the trade issues. So to begin, let me first introduce today's panelists. Our panel members include the Honorable David Merritt, Minister of Highways, Minister of Sask Builds and Procurement, Minister responsible for the Global Transportation Hub at the Government of Saskatchewan. And Derek Sanderson, Director of Washington State Department of Agriculture. Adam Holland, hiding behind me in the small chair. He's the Managing Counsel of the Global Trade and Compliance for J.R. Simplot, and a very valuable colleague of mine. And Lisa Charpeau-Hansen, Director of the Oregon Department of Agriculture. And finally, the Honorable Lana Popham, Minister of Agriculture and Food at the Government of British Columbia. So let's kick things off and get started here. So let's start off with the issue of trade challenges. How are current trade tensions between the U.S. and Canada specifically impacting farmers and agricultural businesses in the region? And maybe we'll just start on the end and go down the line. Lana?
Good morning, everybody. I'm so happy to see so many people in this room. I didn't realize we were going to be so popular this morning, but I'm happy to see it. So I'm Lana Popham. I'm the Minister of Agriculture and Food for British Columbia. And I could probably speak on behalf of everybody by saying this has been a very interesting 6 months for us up in Canada. In British Columbia, we're definitely different than Saskatchewan. Every province has its unique flair, but British Columbia is a bit of an ingredients province. So we produce over 200 land-based commodities and pull 100 species out of the sea. So we've got everything a chef could dream of. We're a little bit like Quebec in that way. But so we're smaller scale in some regards to some of our prairie provinces. We just do a lot more of the individual items. We're also really great customers of the US. So we actually trade $4.5 billion. We trade with the US, and then we purchase another $1 billion on top of that from the US. And so there's a $1 billion trade deficit in the favor of the US. And we really value our relationship. One of the things that I think has been most difficult over the last 6 months is that we have such integrated agriculture and food supply chain going right down the coast, all the way down to Mexico. Many of our farmers own businesses on both sides of the border and in Mexico. So that has brought challenges as far as trying to figure out where we're going and how it's going to affect people. We all know that businesses need consistency, reliability. They need to be able to predict the future. And I think that's been the hardest. We also obviously are facing the same challenges that most areas are around just the cost of production. And that has also been triggered by some of these unjustified trade issues. So we are seeing our population in British Columbia really embrace local goods, which I think a lot of folks are anyway, but we've really ramped it up. We have a Buy BC, Buy Canadian promotion that we're doing. I see two of our amazing chicken producers, poultry representatives in the front here. They're eager to be here. They're plugging away as we face other really difficult situations. Including climate change. We're the province that's the hardest hit by avian influenza. So we've got a lot of things coming at us, but we've got a really amazing, resilient agriculture community, and we're going to get through it, but it would be really nice to have a year where everything feels normal.
Thanks. David Merritt, from province of Saskatchewan, former Minister of Agriculture, province of Saskatchewan from 2018 to 2024. So I've been dealing with the agriculture issues for quite some time, and obviously went through the COVID issues as well. The agriculture trade industry for the province of Saskatchewan, and Travis did touch on some of the key points on the volume of acres we have and the amount of production that comes out of the province of Saskatchewan is quite large. And obviously we're an exporting province, and we really rely on trade issues and trade corridors and things like that we really are important for us in the province of Saskatchewan. I just want to give you a couple of examples of how important the U.S. Market is to the province of Saskatchewan, in not only in agriculture, but in other exports as well. Probably for a lot of you don't know, as far as the province of Saskatchewan, we're one of the world leaders in uranium production. We're second in Canada for oil and gas production. Obviously, number one for agriculture, and also for forestry. We're right there beside BC and Alberta as well. So, but some of our top trading partners in the United States are states, and I want to give you some examples because I think it's important for you to understand how important it is for Saskatchewan to continue to build the trading relationships and continue the trade with our U.S. partners. Some states that we do business with from the province of Saskatchewan, our exports are greater than we do with our two largest countries internationally. And I'm going to give you a few examples. Minnesota leads the way at number one. We do over just under $3 billion a year in trade to the state of Minnesota. California is right there, just about $2.8 billion worth of business. Montana is $2.4 billion. Illinois is $2.3 billion. Oregon, $1.1 billion. And Indiana is just under $1 billion. So to give you an example, in Minnesota, $2.9 billion, say might as well $3 billion. There's only two countries that outdo Minnesota. That's United States and China. So that's how important the trade of agriculture commodities are to Saskatchewan. A good number of that would be obviously agriculture equipment. We are probably the world leaders in the production of ag tillage equipment for what we're seeing really take over the North American landscape through obviously Saskatchewan, Alberta, Manitoba, and the Midwest United States with continuous cropping and no-till drills. The bulk of them built predominantly in Saskatchewan with the probably 3 or 4 of the largest world manufacturers there. So it's important for us to continue to build on the trading relationships that we have. Obviously, potash is a huge export to the U.S. industry and to the ag sector in the United States. They need it. They have to have it. Talking to my friends from Simplot, they understand that quite well, that the potash is obviously very much needed there. Obviously, canola oil is another big export into the United States in excess of $2 billion as well. So it's important for us to continue the relationship and to build on the trading relationship with our partners in the United States. We were quite thankful to a big degree that we don't see a significant tariff impact on the ag sector, but we do see concerns, and from I've heard from the ag sector in the province of Saskatchewan, is the products that we need from the United States and coming up that way too. Especially when we see on the chemical side and other products that we actually do need that do come from the United States as well, and some fertilizer requirements as well too. So it's important for us. And I think, I've said this before in other forums as well, the agriculture industry really for the North American side has a really fluid flow between United States and Canada. I look at both the livestock sector, I look at the ag commodity sector and the importance of it. And I'll just give you, I can give you some examples. I think our premier kind of said it pretty good in the statement, and I can't quote him verbatim on it, but he talked about a farmer, whether he was in Montana or whether he was in Saskatchewan, where it really didn't matter how the integration of the agriculture industry is between those two farmers in buying a drill, whether it's made in Saskatchewan, or buying a tractor, whether it's made in Illinois or Iowa, wherever the case may be. And same thing with trucks, everything we buy, even to grains. I was at a reception here a couple of weeks ago. A good friend of mine retired from the seed growing business, and there was 2 or 3 farmers from Montana that were up there to recognize him because they'd been buying seed grain from that farmer in just south of La Flèche, Montana. And these guys were just he's from La Flèche, Saskatchewan, and the farmers are from around the Opheim area in Montana. And they'd been buying seed grain from that farmer for over 40 years. So you see that kind of integration in the agriculture industry in the province of Saskatchewan and in the United States too. And my constituency borders Montana, about 200 miles long. And the relationship I have with friends in Montana, and same as Montana's that come up and do business, ag business in communities in my constituency, they're buying equipment. It's transported back and forth. In fact, when we did some highway work in my constituency, it was very apparent that the implement dealers were asking for pullouts right along the border so that when they delivered equipment, they could pull over and unhook so that the American trucker could come and unhook or hook onto it and pull it down into the United States. And it's important, and that's the kind of integration, and that's the kind of important relationship we really do have with our American counterparts, and we have to continue that. We're very reliable on each other to grow our business. And I heard it probably pretty loud and clear over the past, as my colleague from BC said, in the past few months, and I heard it from the industry players in the province of Saskatchewan, that were very concerned that if we were doing any retaliatory tariffs, they were very concerned of how that was going to impact their business in the United States as well. Especially when I heard it from some of the key manufacturers saying, look, we do business down there. These companies are relying on us to buy our product. We don't want them coming to us and saying, well, you're doing this, so we're going to do this, or we're not going to buy your product. That's kind of what I heard. I mean, it didn't happen, but that was a concern that was raised. And so we're thankful that way that we can still continue. I think at the end of the day, the United States is still going to be our biggest trading partner in the province of Saskatchewan. We'll continue to build those relationships. I think you're starting to see it. I know in Saskatchewan right now, we're looking at trade offices where we've got 9 international trade offices around the world where we're looking at expanding our trades. And the United States, we have a firm in Washington that works for us there as well. And we build on those relationships to build trade. And I think it's important for us to do that. We'll get through this. We will. And we'll continue to do business. And we want to see our companies do well in our province, as I'm sure every jurisdiction does, because we know if they're doing business, they're hiring people, they're paying taxes, and it allows us to do what we have to do as a government, building schools, hospitals, and highways.
Well, good morning. I'm Lisa Sharpelow Hansen, and I serve as the director of the Oregon Department of Agriculture. This is a really interesting question to me because it hits on something that I've talked about in state with my Northwest state partners, as well as over the last couple of weeks, our partners in Canada. And the word I use to describe where we're at right now is uncertainty. It's uncertainty for our producers. It's uncertainty for our processors. It's uncertainty for our integrated agricultural systems. I think of the Northwest and Canada as an integrated agriculture food processing sector, because we're so interdependent on what we do, and whether that's the food commodities going back and forth, cattle going back and forth, or equipment and our agricultural inputs. They all impact whether it's our processors or our packers in some way. And I think what this uncertainty has done, as I look at it out even more global beyond the Northwest, we're competing in a world market that quickly, if you add tariffs back and forth, makes our products from this region non-competitive in the world marketplace. We know we grow a lot of things and we grow a lot of different things, but there's not much that we grow that can't be grown somewhere else. And we have to be able to compete at cost and quality with those other places. And so the complications that we're seeing today just continue to make it more difficult for the region and our farmers and ranchers to be able to compete in that world market that's so important. Oregon's an export state. 80% of what we grow in our state leaves our state boundaries, and half of that goes overseas. So it's really important that we have trade and the ability to move our products across and integrate and work together and collaborate.
Yeah, hi. Good on.
Straight.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Derek Sanderson, Director of the Washington State Department of Agriculture, and I'll continue on the theme that that Minister Popham started with, the interconnected nature of agriculture in the U.S. and Canada, particularly Washington as a next door neighbor to British Columbia. We particularly are proud of our relationship with British Columbia, and so when we have threats to our supply chains, of course we all take it seriously, and it's a big deal. I mean, we as a state produce over 300 crops and commodities. We're known as a specialty crop state. I mean, half the cropland in the United States is devoted to corn and soybeans. But yet two crops, we grow 300. And so apples are our number one crop, tree fruit or sweet cherry is very important as well, but a number of different products. And we enjoy an important trade relationship with Canada. I mean, the Canadians are the number one purchaser of Washington food and ag products to the tune of over $1 billion. So, our most important trading partner. And from Canada, we get potash, energy products, that sort of thing. But also, very importantly, we have this relationship with Canada with livestock, in that a lot of the harvesting, if you will, of cattle occurs in the United States. So it's produced in Canada, brought to the United States. We have at least 4 plants that receive cattle from Canada, and where we provide the processing. So very important relationship, and we're working hard to try to ensure our friends in Canada that we're with you. We want to make this work, and I think as far as actual impacts felt so far, Director Hansen kind of summed it up as a lot of nervousness and people kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop and figure out where we're going to end up here. We've seen, and I think one of the most troubling things is we've seen the consumers in Canada turn against American products, and that's they're sort of boycotting or preferring Canadian products to ours, that sort of thing. And again, we've enjoyed a very important relationship with the people of Canada and want that to continue. So to the extent that our industry can help smooth those waves and come up with or come back to a very mutually beneficial working relationship, we're engaged and supportive.
And good morning, everybody. My name is Adam Holland. I'm a global trade attorney and counsel for the JR Simplot company out of Boise, Idaho. Some of you may be already familiar with us, but we do phosphate fertilizer and French fries. And if you have other things that start with F, we'll do that too. We do. So we own a couple of mines on the phosphate side. We own a couple of mines in Utah and on the Idaho-Wyoming border. We will go and we'll turn that into a slurry that gets pumped over to Rock Springs, Wyoming, and into Pocatello, Idaho, where we turn that into fertilizer. We'll then go and then ship that throughout the Western United States and also up into Canada, quite a bit into up there through Alberta, Lethbridge, and then it gets distributed from there. And then also on the other side, we have a very large French fry production plant in Manitoba. And then we ship that, and then that supplies a lot of restaurants along the East Coast. Our claim to fame is that we were the primary and first supplier for the McDonald's company. And so a good chunk of the French fries that you have eaten in your lifetime came from one of our plants. We have production plants in, let's take a look at my notes. United States, of course, Canada, of course, Mexico, Argentina, Australia, China, India, and then most recently we announced that we're going to buy another large French fry producer out of Europe as well. So we have a global footprint. And despite that, we're actually still one of the top 100 exporters out of the United States. And if you're also looking at, bulk cargo in the form of phosphate going up into Canada and elsewhere, we're actually one of the top 50 exporters out of the United States, any industry, any company. And so we have a very large supply chain. And so, the trade aspect of it really affects us quite a bit. And I just like to thank President Trump for making this an issue, because nobody cared about trade attorneys before that. And now everybody cares, right? So, but as far as threats go, I know that there's a lot of discussions here about the trade threats within the region, and that's certainly these are things to take seriously. During the 3 days back in March 3rd to the 6th, there were 25% tariffs in place for Canadian products coming to the United States. Over that time period, we contributed a couple $1 million of additional revenue to the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. So there's, along with all the other companies. One of the things we've talked about as a panel this morning is just how interconnected and integrated the United States is with Canada in particular. The border almost doesn't exist anymore in terms of trade. But you go and you throw those tariffs in place, and suddenly it's a huge disruption, right? I think that we as my personal opinion here is that there's a lot of smoke going on right now. There's a lot of noise going on. If you ever took an essay during, back in your college days, there's definitely information and facts that your professors would throw into your hypotheticals that you needed to answer those, and you need to ignore certain information, certain pieces there to really focus on the real facts and the real threats. I think that we'll see what President Trump and his Canadian counterparts are able to negotiate out of this piece of it. But I think that the real noise, or the real facts and the real threats, are really abroad, right? So retaliatory duties, that's going to be the real challenge, and coming up. We'll see what happens here on August 1st when we start to see the higher country specific rates go into effect. But the real danger here is that you start to see retaliatory duties against against the U.S. side. So far, nearly all countries have agreed to go into begin negotiations with the United States rather than put up their own tariffs. But if that were the case, you know, just like we just talked about for the canola oil leaving Canada, you'd see many other agricultural products get affected. Right. So you've seen tariffs put onto steel, aluminum, automobiles here in the United States, right? Other countries would start to focus on U.S. agriculture. That's really the risk. Because of course you hurt them you hit them where it hurts, right? And to hurt us here in the United States and Canada, again, very integrated economies, you're going to hit us on the agriculture side. And so, you know, French fries would certainly be a part of that. So we're kind of waiting and seeing what comes of that.
Well, thanks for that, Adam. And thanks to all of the panelists. Really, really good points. I just wanted to talk about, you know, Derek, you made a point about livestock and cattle crossing the border. I was down in Texas and met with the Texas Farm Bureau in April, and I thought the biggest concerns they would have would be fertilizer and potash deliveries and everything else. And they had all of their fertilizer landed, so they didn't care about that at all. But they were very concerned about livestock, about grass or cattle in the panhandle and everything else. It was top of mind to them. So my question to the panelists next is, what measures are states and provinces taking to mitigate the negative impacts of trade tariffs and disruptions of their agricultural exports? You want to take that one first, Derek?
Sure. Of course, tariffs are a federal government creature, so we don't have much control. We try to make our opinions known to our congressional delegation, to USDA and others, but there's not a lot we can do directly with respect to tariffs. I think we're very focused on, so we talk a lot about tariffs, but I think one of the things we're very focused on is non-tariff barriers that we face on a regular basis. And a lot of that we can have a direct role in convincing foreign governments that a particular disease or pest they're concerned about is not in fact a real threat to them. One big example for us is the fact we can't get apples, which are number one crop, get apples into Japan, which is a close partner, without fumigation, and the fumigation process destroys the apples. So we're essentially locked out of the Japanese market based on a phytosanitary ban. And similarly, we can't get blueberries into South Korea. So there are things that we can focus on. Again, the tariff piece of it, we're sort of stuck with, other than being able to provide evidence of what it means and what it means to these great relationships we have with the Canadian provinces. And so we certainly make sure that information is known by, again, our congressional delegation and folks at USTR and USDA.
So I'm just going to build a little bit on Director Sandison's comments. Director Sandison and I traveled together a week ago, I think, if my memory serves me correctly. And we were in Alberta, and we visited farms and plants and feedlots. And really, a lot of it, along with the provincial government, was about communication. And how do we maintain the relationships that we need to continue to do work together? And where are the places that we can agree to find opportunities that help us? Because we know there are things going on at the federal level above us that will provide input to, but we don't control that. The other piece that we talked about as we were talking with our counterparts, we talked about the measurable impacts. How do we communicate the measurable impacts, the economic impacts of what's going on with tariff and trade right now with our federal counterparts to understand what it's doing to the economy, what it's doing to rural communities across the states and in the provinces, how giving something more numeric than just talking about the relationship piece. But a lot of our work was person to person, relationship to relationship, we still want to work together because we know we need each other. Director Sanderson also hit on phytosanitary and sanitary. And one of the things that really struck me was the movement of cattle across the border and having it hung up. And if we could figure out some better ways to deal with some of those issues so that we don't run into quality and condition issues, you know, those are those ongoing conversations of how do we meet each other's needs, but still protect ourselves as well.
Okay, can you hear me? No. How's that? Yeah, okay. So it's such an interesting time, and I'll just give you a reflection on what's maybe what's really become really obvious to me over the last couple of days. So I have been coming to PNWER for years and I've loved it. I love meeting up with our US counterparts and it's really, really valuable. I've been mostly in that time, the Minister of Agriculture. I became the Minister of Agriculture in 2017, but I used to come as the critic for agriculture since maybe 2010, something go way back. So the relationships that we've developed over the years are critically important. And some of that has to do with maintaining trade relationships, but it's also about a lot of other things. And so we have a great dependence on the University of Oregon as far as research and science, specifically around hazelnut trees. We depend on Washington for research. There's a lot of things that we talk about cross-border animal health that I think is improved if we continue these face-to-face meetings. Our provincial vet is here and we'll be sitting on one of the panels over the next couple of days. We've got our chicken folks here that are going to be sitting on a panel. It's really, really important for us. So I just was trying to figure out how to get here. And I have this fascination, maybe more like an obsession about the train. So I hopped on the train in downtown Vancouver and I made my way to Seattle. And I came through Delta in British Columbia, through the farmlands, which are really doing well right now, crossed the border. We had the usual kind of border interaction, checking of passports. And then we made our way down to Seattle, coming through a lot of really amazing farmland as well. And the only thing that really was different was that the snacks were different on the train than we get in BC. But I felt so happy to be able to travel freely over the border and come down and see all of the folks that I've known over the years, but also just to be in the United States. My son has lived in Los Angeles for the last 5 years, so I have been able to get to know that city a bit. But it made me feel really sad that there's a lot of folks on both sides that are feeling this weird tension about visiting. And I'm bringing that up as a Minister of Agriculture because in British Columbia, we're a massive tourism community, and we have an incredible BC restaurant industry. And our restaurants really highlight our food in British Columbia. And so what I've seen is that they've already been doing it, but they've really highlighted BC food. And I feel like that's what we all should be doing from the different angles, from different countries, especially as we're heading into things like FIFA. We all should be working together to figure out how to highlight our regions, and food is one of those things. And so I feel like we've really embraced by BC and British Columbia. We were doing that before this incident, and we will continue to do it regardless. But I feel like 70% of what we trade agriculturally goes to the United States. It's an easy trade partner normally, and we definitely are trying to diversify. I spent 10 days in Korea Malaysia and Japan last month, trying to figure out if there's some opportunities there. And everyone's very interested in our food because it's reliable, it's safe, it's got a great reputation. But let's face it, it's a harder relationship to have. There's a lot of complicities with moving things across the water into different countries. Just even speaking about how to move beef around, et cetera. So I want to see us go back to the way things were before this happened. We've got a lot of work to do, but I know one thing, that when people from the United States are coming up to British Columbia now, we're really, really welcoming up there. So come on up. And I have to say, everywhere I've gone here, people have thanked us for coming down. So we're really good friends. We just have to remember that, and we have to keep plugging away. But this is a very difficult time. And, you know, there's anger that can get in the way of that, but mostly we're here taking our place at PNWER this year because we want to make sure that our relationships with you continue. We need you, and I think you need us too.
Yeah, I guess when you talk about the trade tariffs and the threats around it, obviously it's a huge concern for the province of Saskatchewan too, especially from the ag sector. And I think, you know, to give an example of where we've seen that happen, and the concern we have is obviously what China did as a retaliation to Canada on the tariff on EVs, where they put a 100% tariff on canola. And where I'm going with this is where that happens to be a concern for the province of Saskatchewan and the canola industry for us is right now China is working on a negotiation with Australia to try and backfill, or obviously sign a contract to backfill that canola sector from the province of Saskatchewan, which, you know, Australia can't fill at all. But where that comes to play when you look at the Canada-US and the concerns around that is if tariffs came into play and had an impact on the ag sector in the province of Saskatchewan, and I'll just use one example, it would be canola meal. Canola meal is a huge export from the province of Saskatchewan with the crush facilities we have there and the ones that are being built in the province of Saskatchewan as we speak. California is probably the biggest buyer of canola meal from Saskatchewan strictly for the dairy industry, to give them their omega-3 and their milk products. Now, if there's a tariff on that and it affects their bottom line, they may switch that to soy meal. That would then have an impact on the canola meal exports from Saskatchewan to California and other sectors. So that obviously raises a concern for us. We're not being impacted on that side yet, but that would be a threat that could impact. Obviously, even on the ag manufacturing, on the tillage side, we could see significant impact on that side as well. We have companies in Saskatchewan that actually manufacture agriculture products or ag equipment products for major manufacturers in the United States, or either John Deere or Case IH or New Holland or whoever the case may be. So those could be concerns that we would also have for this sector here in the province of Saskatchewan.
All right. Well, thank you for those responses. And just a reminder, if you have a question, drop it in the Hoove app, and we'll try to get to some of those as well, too. Just as an aside, I started my lobbying career with Simplot almost a decade ago. I had the great pleasure of starting at the first Trump administration, which was interesting to say the least. And you might recall that trade has always been an issue with President Trump. I think my Idaho delegation got tired of me showing up and complaining about NAFTA at that time. And he renegotiated NAFTA and did a little bit of rebranding. So to ask this question now, just to know, if you'd asked me 10 years later if I was still talking about Donald Trump, I'd have never believed you, but here we are. Anyway, the next question I have in line relates to NAFTA and the rebranding to the USMCA. So how can the USMCA agreement be leveraged to resolve some of the conflicts we have between our countries? And if you had some ideas of changes that you'd like to recommend in updating the agreement, we can talk about that as well. So maybe I'll start with Adam. I know you know quite a bit about the USMCA and how it might work for us, and then we'll go down the line.
So the USMCA, of course, formerly known as NAFTA, if you go and you actually look at the terms of the agreement, you actually get in the rules of origin, the technical pieces, which people like me like to look at. Not much changed. I mean, it was really around the automotive sector, and then some carve outs. My understanding is that the Canadian dairy industry is something that the Canadian government wants very much to protect, including actually going and passing an act through Parliament, saying that that's not something that they're willing to give up. I think that may be just a point of contention with President Trump because he didn't get that during the first administration. So that may be one of the things that he's pushing for right now. You see these fentanyl tariffs, that's is the under IEPA, which is the legal venue or channel which the president is trying to push these. There's not really a lot of legs on that, right? There might be some for Mexico, but for Canada, it's not really a real valid reason to go after and implement those tariffs. So, the USMCA, as far as how it's affecting our company, as long as the USMCA continues to exempt companies from the fentanyl tariffs, it really doesn't affect us and most companies across the United States or on the Canadian side. In that regard. But as far as, I think the one thing that, for example, that is important that we talked about is, we ship phosphate fertilizer to Canada. From Canada, you're shipping potash, potassium into the United States. That trade has to continue, right? So one of the things that we've done successfully is we have a relationship with Ambassador Greer, who's the United States Trade Representative. He was our outside counsel before becoming the USTR. And so one of the things that from that experience he gained visibility to was the importance of fertilizer, in the United States, and it's not just the phosphate that we produce here as a company, but also the potassium that we don't make in the United States and has to come in. So one of the carve outs that was made as part of those IEPA tariffs was a reduction in the tariff. So if you notice that, when there's the 25% tariff for across the board, if it doesn't originate under the USMCA, however, there's carve outs for energy and there's also a carve out for potash as well. So having those sorts of relationships and being able to leverage that really helps to, it will helps both countries in the long run. So the more informed that our government counterparts and friends are, as far as what the issues are, the better off we all are. So appreciate all of Ken's efforts in that regard too.
There's some pretty critical discussions that are happening right now with our federal government in the United States. So I'm going to defer to the federal government on this one. I think I'm going to stay out of it.
Why wouldn't I say the same thing? No, I think Adam, I mean, he's a lot more expert in the field than I am for sure. I can only say that, the USMCA agreement is something that we've respected and we've seemed to have done well with it. We look at the investment that American companies have made into the province of Saskatchewan in the ag sector, and it is a big investment. They have made a huge investment into our province, and obviously they're comfortable with that investment and with that trade relationship under the USMCA, and hopefully that's where we'll end up and continue on that way.
I think I'm going to hit back to kind of a theme that's been used throughout, is the recognition that we really are an integrated farm, ranch, food, agriculture, processing region, and trying to recognize that we need to be able to move products, inputs, whether those are farm inputs or food products as ingredients, back and forth in this region for all of us to be successful, is really something that I continue to look at and encourage. And I think it's dealing with some of those things, the phytosanitary again, and the sanitary issues as we're moving our products back and forth. But ultimately, if we don't figure some of this out, it hurts our rural communities, whether our rural communities are in the states or in the provinces, and those local communities that support. And you can do the full trickle down effect, schools, hospitals, et cetera. And so we just need to figure out, and I think, again, it's amplifying that full integration of our systems.
Director Hansen mentioned, excuse me, that we were up in Alberta last week, and we had a farm roundtable with industry folks and with the Alberta government. And one of the key points that was made in that was the tremendous opportunity that USMCA or CUSMA, if it's called up in Canada, provides to us. I mean, it made us an extremely powerful trading bloc, North American trading bloc. And to the extent that if we're smart, we take advantage of that and take full advantage of it and make ourselves collectively, Canada, US, Mexico, collectively a powerhouse. And I'm concerned that having so much of a swirl outside of CUSMA or USMCA sort of detracts from the importance of our three-country agreement. And so, I think many of the issues that are being discussed could be incorporated into our dealings, our three-country dealings under USMCA and CUSMA.
Well, thank you for that. One of PNWER's true strengths is the ability to bring in legislators, but also bring in private industry together in the same summit, in the same room. So, Adam, I want to put the next question to you. What specific challenges or opportunities is JR Simplot facing in exporting to Canada from the US and vice versa?
So within North America, the challenge again, like I said, is that you have to go and take a look at get rid of the noise and really focus on what are the real challenges, right? When we're talking about, for example, fertilizer, right? Fertilizer is an input for all crops, right? Whether it's canola or whether it's anything else that's grown in Canada. And so when you're talking about that and you lose customers, for example, so China right now has the power of the purse. And they buy a lot of, and until recently were buying an immense amount of canola from Canada. They were using Canada needed a lot of phosphate fertilizer to make that happen, right? When you lose them as a customer, or they increase tariffs, right, to the point where it doesn't become economically feasible anymore to allow those sales to occur. In that situation, you don't need as much fertilizer, right? So again, it's the, just going back to I think probably a question that a lot of people have that I get a lot is, do we see the tariffs coming back up again, right? I think that, just those 3 days back in March would cause enough of a shock to the system. I really don't see that happening again. I would see almost every lobbyist in the United States would go to President Trump and say, no, this is hurting our companies, right? And you got to have to look at what does President Trump really want out of these tariffs, right? He's looking for, he's been very, very transparent about this. He wants to address the trade imbalance, right? And there is a trade imbalance with Canada. And so what he wants Canadians to buy more U.S. products to try to help boost American jobs. And if you look at the reciprocal tariffs around the world, you're looking at the tariffs are not, even though he said that the tariffs were actually based on the rates that other countries are charging us, it has nothing to do with that. What the tariff rates are completely based on are the trade imbalances by country. And what's interesting is he hit everybody, right? He hit some countries that didn't have people in them, right? With these tariffs. So it really was just a shotgun approach to see what came out of that. And so, it's amazing to me how great Ken is at his job. And, we have the Canadian consulate come and visit us a little while ago, and they said, what does President Trump want, right? And so, what we communicated at that time was, you got to look at what trade imbalances, what can Canada provide to the United States to try to satisfy, President Trump's desires. And maybe that's the dairy industry, which has been in the, access to the dairy industry, which has been a challenge for a long time. Who knows, right? But you have to kind of look at what does the other partner want so that you can be successful on the other side. But as far as Simplot goes, as long as the USMCA stays in place and is exempts cross-border trade, those French fries come to the United States from Canada, phosphate is able to come from the United States into Canada duty-free. It's, we're in pretty good shape.
Thanks, Adam. So I know we could probably spend the whole morning just talking about tariffs, but I want to kind of shift the focus just a little bit and just recognize the fact that, all of us up here on the panel, all of us in Canada and the US, we're all in ag, we're all farmers. There's really not a whole lot of difference between farmers in Canada and farmers in the US. So let's just look at some different challenges that go beyond the tariffs. So we'll just get some comments from folks. But what, in everyone's opinion, what are the most pressing barriers hindering your agriculture production in the region you're in? You know, things like labor, production costs, water, transportation. I know in the U.S., labor is big for us right now with the crackdown on the border and whether or not we'll have the farm laborers we need. But let's just talk about some other challenges just beyond tariffs that that agriculture is facing in both our countries. Director, would you want to kick off?
Yeah, well, I think you touched on labor, and that's of course for Washington, which is known for its tree fruit, but it's a very labor intensive industry. That's been the big pinch point for us in terms of driving up production costs. Other factors have driven up production costs, the cost of fuels, lubricants, whatever. I mean, everything went up over several years here recently. And it got to the point where it's very difficult for farmers to break even. I mean, we're producing at cost many times. We just went through a cherry harvest where a lot of cherries got left on the tree because it would cost more to pick and pack those cherries than they'd make from selling the cherries, and so the farmers would. So, I mean, I think that's that bottom line issue. We're losing farms in Washington. We have a tremendous heritage of agriculture in our state, and many of the old family farms are just simply getting out. They're selling out, they're shutting down, but it's a difficult time for ag. At the same time, we have an issue we call the urban-rural divide, where it's very hard to get people in in urban areas where most of the population resides. Many of the legislative seats that are in our state legislature are held by legislators from those urban areas. They don't really understand agriculture. They don't really understand the rural life. And because of that, they tend to produce policies and regulations that add to that burden that the farmers are facing in terms of trying to survive. I mean, it's literally that bad. 9 of the top 10, from a value production standpoint, 9 of our top 10 crops and commodities lost value. They were from year to year recently. And so it's across the board, and it's very serious. And we're working hard with Washington State University, our land grant, to help tell the story of what's actually happening on the ground and what is really affecting bottom lines for farmers. So I think that's where, I mean, not to paint a total gloom and doom picture, but that's where we're at in Washington.
So I think I'll just build off of Director Sanderson's comments. Net farm income in Oregon was down in 23, it was down in 24, and based on what's going on right now, it's going to be down again in 25. This is a real problem, across the state. How are we going to keep operators operating? And you can pick whichever level you want. They can only hang on so long before they need to look to different things. So just that notion of having the ability to have businesses that are resilient and can survive is something that we're thinking about. Labor, water available, enough of it at the right time in the right places with the right soils is a big deal in Oregon right now. And that is a complicated issue way beyond this conversation around trade. So I won't go into water. We've talked a lot about input costs, and that can be for any type of agricultural operation, whether it's our livestock sector and feed costs, whether it's our row crop and other equipment costs have gone up. Every which way you look, the input costs for producing things has risen, and we are seeing lower commodity prices everywhere, with the exception of beef. Our cattle guys are doing, they're feeling an all-time high and loving it. Transportation continues to be an issue for us as well. And whether that's within the state moving it or export, I think there's still challenges in terms of containers being available at the right time in the right spaces, and being able to truck. the competition for land across our state in Oregon is a big deal. And do you have it in wheat, or do you have land going into energy? Is that solar? Is that wind and others that could be more profitable, but you need the food production. So there's a larger competition rather than commodity to commodity today. It's commodity to different sectors where it may be used. And then I think our aging farm community. The age of the family average farmer has increased. We are not seeing an input of the next generation in the same way we would like to. And when you have the type of economics that we have, the cost of entry, it makes it a really tough space. So how do you build resilience into that system so we can keep our working lands working?
Thanks. I think I can agree with what the previous speakers have said. I'll just add probably one for a couple for Saskatchewan that are obviously a huge concern for us. Obviously, it's logistics. Transportation, number one right now. In my travels on trade missions globally, I actually heard it from the customers that were buying our product that they were very concerned about getting their product in time. That is number one, and that is our biggest challenge out of the province of Saskatchewan. Is obviously we're dependent on 2 rail lines that run either to Vancouver or Rupert, or run east to Thunder Bay and through Montreal as well. And in my discussions, in fact, I was in Vancouver Port last year, and we had a discussion about this, and it's very concerning for us. And I know it's got nothing to do with the province of Vancouver, but they're trying to do obviously an expansion at the Vancouver Port, and the challenge they're having with that. And believe it or not, they started that process 13 years ago, and still don't have approval yet today from the federal government. Which is an expansion which is needed, required, if they're going to continue to grow. And the challenge we have with it in the province of Saskatchewan is we see our ag commodities and exports growing, and we can see it growing at a level greater than what anybody else is trying to adjust to. So if we see a 5 or 7% growth in ag commodities and the export side, the railways are looking at a 2% growth or maybe a 3% growth, and the Vancouver Port looks at the same way. Well, obviously, then we're seeing a backlog of how that can transpire. And to give you an example of how that really does impact our trade relationships, when I was talking to a customer in Dubai, and he was looking for canola, and he says he's crushing about 4,500 tons a day. So in other words, he's crushing over 100,000 tons, or 4,500 tons a day is times 30 is 120,000 tons a month. So in other words, he's got to have those ships coming in at a certain time. So if a ship isn't getting there and is delayed by 30 or 40 days, now he's trying to access canola from somewhere else. And then he says, if I'm going there and I can get a reliable supply, I'm no longer coming to see you folks. And that's the challenge we have. So we really have to work on a trade corridor. I think it's very important that we have a national trade corridor, and so that we can export all products. We're having the same thing with potash that is happening. We have mine expansions going on. We have the world's largest potash mine that is being built as we speak to come online. And when that one hits the market, we're going to be challenged by that. And we're also seeing expansions in the potash mines that we have already. The world needs the potash to grow the food, and we have to find ways to get it and to get it to market. And it's challenging for us because we're landlocked, and we have to find ways to be able to move the product outside of that. Talking about other risks, I met a farmer friend when I was in Ministry of Ag, and he's in the southeast part of the province, and he was an accountant by profession, came home to his dad's farm, and they've expanded the farm and grown to a significant size. And he told me something a few years ago that really kind of resonated with me. He says, he said, David, he says, I have 3 risks on my farm that concern me more than anything. And he says, 2 I can deal with. He said, obviously the markets, I have to really watch the markets and how they do and how I do that way. And obviously the weather has an impact on everything as well. But he said, my number 1 risk is ag policy. And decisions made by whether it's provincial or federal government level, on how they're dealing with ag policy is his biggest concern and challenge that he has as well. So it's something we have to work on. I think in our province, our government has worked well to try and deliver programs on the business risk management side to protect the sector, both from grains and oilseeds and from a livestock sector as well. So, but that kind of resonates with me as one of his biggest concerns. Other than that, I think everybody else, what they've said, resonates with us as well in the province.
So, really interesting question. And I think just like everywhere else in Canada and North America and probably globally, we're all facing the same things. When I was in Asia, cost of production, cost of living, all of it, it was exactly the same conversation that I was having, whether it was Japan or South Korea. One of the things that's really hammering us in British Columbia are climate-related events. We have been hammered by floods, fires, heat-related events, cold events, and so much so that we have specific programs to try and help farmers, in 2 cases, grape farmers, fruit tree farmers, replant their crops, really looking at what type of varieties are more resilient to some of the climate action that we're seeing. And that's a major hurdle because it really takes us out of production. Our largest wine producing region in the Okanagan in British Columbia has had such a kill with our grapevines that we are now sourcing grapes from our pals in Washington and Oregon to try and get us through until we can start producing again. So another year or two until that some of our larger vineyards come back online. This is really causing us as a government to take a look at programming that we're delivering, investing in different technologies, different types of variety research, et cetera, to try and prepare ourselves for what's to come. And what's to come is not looking easy. And so I think that's maybe the most pressing thing that's coming at us as government is how do we prepare for more of the type of climate incidents that are affecting agriculture. But I'm in agreement with my colleagues. There's everything else is also coming at us. That's why I think it's pretty important for us to try and figure out this trade situation, because we can lessen the stress on farmers, on businesses by just making sure that we're operating as trusted trading partners. That's going to help people a lot. And I might just take a moment to just respond to your comment about dairy. We're really proud of our dairy industry in Canada. It's a big part of British Columbia. That's all I'm going to say.
Adam, did you want to add anything related to our company challenges?
Yeah, that in my comments earlier meant no disrespect. It was just kind of just discussing the dynamic that's going on, and it's lots of tensions there, of course, and very respectful of that. I think just the last piece that I just add to that is that is not directly tariff. Well, it's caused by tariffs, but it's not a tariff related issue by itself. Is just during COVID, of course, we had ships lined up that were stuck in China because they just weren't moving across, and then we had huge pileups of ships at the port of Oakland and Long Beach and Tacoma. If those ships don't leave there to come here, we don't have any ships to load up to send back, right? And so we're actually seeing, because of these tariffs, we're actually seeing kind of a COVID level disruption in the international and the container ships that are going back and forth across the country. And of course, we're talking about French fries for our company. They're in refrigerated containers that there's just not an infinite supply of them, right? And so if they get stuck at a foreign port, we don't have access to export them from too. But it's also a challenge that we're dealing with.
Well, thank for those great answers. I'm just going to ask the panelists to keep their next answers a little bit short. We want to leave time for some questions from the audience and from the Whova app. Put your questions into there. And yes, I am looking at you, Minister Merritt. So the next question to the panelists, how can U.S. and Canada industries and government on both sides of the border collaborate to improve productivity through innovation and new technology and sharing of knowledge, and best practices. Who wants to start first on that one?
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, we have a relationship with British Columbia and Oregon in the Cascadia corridor efforts. And so there's a lot of emphasis being put on high-tech development of high-tech options for industries, better transportation systems, all that. And ag's part of that picture. But one of the issues we have is we've previously talked about the difficult times that farmers and ranchers are going through, and well, not so much ranchers today, but in general, farmers are going through in terms of bottom line issues. And I mean, the technology is blooming. The problem is that new technologies tend to be very expensive, and it's catching farmers at a point where they're least able to afford the technological changes that would help them long term. So that's a huge issue that we're dealing with, because again, I think we see it in the tree fruit industry where, I mean, if you go into a modern packing plant for apples or cherries, there's not many workers in those plants. I mean, it's the sorting and grading of the apples or the cherries is done by computers with 30 to 50 camera shots of each piece of fruit as it moves down the production line. So again, I'm very concerned about the affordability of technology that we're developing, and I think maybe that's an area where government investment might be helpful.
So I think it builds upon everything we've been talking about. Again, it's the accessibility back and forth. One of my colleagues spoke to research on hazelnuts with Oregon State University. We got to get it OSU, not U of O. There's a big, Oregon State University. But while Director Sanderson and I were in Canada last week, we visited Olds College, which is an agricultural-based college. And just thinking about how we share research back and forth, because we are so interconnected, are there ways that we can find efficiencies in terms of that research that helps both of us? So I will keep my answer very short so I can pass it off and give a little bit of time to my colleague.
I'll be very, very short. The province invests about $40 million a year in ag research at our university and research stations. So we're good that way. I think you see we have an ag tech fund. You're seeing new innovation in crop rotations. You're seeing seed placement, variable rate fertilizer usage. Those are the types of things that are going to increase productivity and bring down the cost of production, but increase productivity.
That was really short. Good going. So we are also investing in agritech innovation. We launched our BC Center for Agritech Innovation a few years back, and within that particular entity, we're reaching out, of course, working with Canada, across Canada, the US, but also into other countries. We signed some MOUs over in Asia when we were there. The research and the development of agritech equipment is going to be part of our success in the future. We're interested in BC, and I'm not going to go long, don't worry, but we have only 5% of our land base is considered agricultural. We actually have an agricultural land reserve. Half of that is probably farmable. So 2.5% of our province is available for agricultural production. We are seeing a lot of interest in increasing our greenhouse production, our vertical farming production. And then we have an interest from a Korean company to come and grow strawberries in abandoned mines and underground tunnels. I toured a facility at downtown Seoul, Korea, that they're growing massive, beautiful strawberries in an old abandoned subway tunnel. And they're a little bit like a cartoon looking at these strawberries, but they're interested in coming over. So I think the cost of land is also something that farmers are really grappling with. And so I don't know how we solve that problem, because even with our agricultural land reserve, there's still an incredible pressure to have it used for something else other than agriculture. So I think we have to be pretty strident. Those of us who believe strongly in agriculture in North America is to protect those farmlands the best that we can.
And so one thing that we, of course, in North America that we do really, really well is innovation, right? I mean, when we're talking about, it's talking about doing more with less or more with the same, that's just how we're growing economically. I'll just take this opportunity just to plug Simplot Innate Potatoes. We have a division called Simplot Plant Sciences. And they'll go on the gene editing through CRISPR, and they'll go in there. They'll actually take a potato, and they've modified some of this branded potato to be blight resistant. One. And then two, also, if you go and if you cut open a banana or a potato within a decent amount of time, it's going to turn brown, right? This will not turn brown. It'll stay. It will not brown like that. So the concept is that if you're throwing it into a truck and otherwise you'd have a lot of browning that would have to be cut off and removed. Without that browning, you can use the whole potato, and so there's going to be less waste. But those are kind of an example of some things that we do at Simplot that we're very proud of.
Thanks, everyone. And I'll add too, we're working on a strawberry through our plant sciences division, so maybe we can grow them in your minds or what have you. So we can talk later. Anyway, we're trying to move some questions to the Whova app. Now, I know this is brought up briefly in the response to an earlier question, but the topic of trade corridors, there's been a lot of conversation about it in Canada. So maybe I'll turn to my Canada friends. And can you elaborate on how these would benefit the agricultural industry and producers?
Yeah, there, now it's working. Yeah, obviously it's something that, as I did touch earlier on the challenge we have in Saskatchewan as being landlocked, and it's something we're very aggressive working on, is trying to have trade corridors right across the country to move all commodities. When you look at the province of Saskatchewan, we're large exporters of obviously potash, uranium, oil and gas, agriculture products. So it's very important for us to have these logistics and have these corridors. It's important to us if we're going to continue to see the industry grow. We have what the world needs. When you look at, we trade with over 150 countries around the world. We have the food, fuel, and fertilizer that they want and they need to continue to grow food. So it's very important for us to have a national trade corridor across the country.
Maybe I'll just add that the issue of the port is obviously an outstanding issue, and any way that we can kind of smooth the waters there to try and open up other opportunities, it's going to be very helpful. But just to my partner in crime here from Saskatchewan, you do have amazing ingredients as well. And for British Columbia, we're looking at opportunities on how we can increase the amount of food processing that we're doing, because we'd really like to be receiving more primary product and then closer to the port, turning that into a value-added product and sending it on its way. So that's what we're looking at.
No, thank you for that. Next question. What are your individual jurisdictions doing to create policies that support farms and farmers to ensure the long-term viability of agriculture across the PNWER region? Who wants to take that one first?
I'll take it.
Okay.
So we have a longstanding policy. It's 50 years old, but we revisit it often. And that's, I mentioned it earlier, it's around the agricultural land reserve. So it's been in place for 50 years. There's a lot of pressure on it for everything else but agriculture, but our farmers really depend on it. It's supposed to be in place to keep the cost of farmland reasonable enough that a farmer can purchase it or most cases lease it to create their business or expand their business. We have particular rules on what you can and can't do on this land. If you're growing a product and you need more of the same product to process something, currently you can grow 50% of what you need and source off the farm 50% of what you need. That's constantly, this is like the biggest talk around the water cooler in British Columbia, guys, the 50% rule. But we are really trying to make sure that farmland is for farming, and we're looking at other ways to encourage processing, whether it's in reclaiming industrial land, whether it's creating food parks like they do in Alberta, trying to make sure that we're keeping pretty strong guidelines around what you can or can't do. And I think our province would look particularly different if we hadn't put this land use tool in place 50 years ago. It's the Fraser Valley is one of our most productive areas in the province, and probably that would be housing by this point. So land use is always contentious, but that's probably the tool that is our most cutting edge even to this day.
Yeah, I think for the province of Saskatchewan, our government has done quite a few things to move the pendulum on the primary producer being, making sure that we have the programs in place to ensure that the primary producer can obviously remain viable. And there, we look at our crop insurance coverage, which we are fully integrated in, and the programs we have in there. And then we also try and work with the livestock sector as well. And some of the programs we have for them, we have a rainfall insurance, we have a forage insurance. We also now have a corn silage insurance for the livestock producers. We also have livestock price insurance, which we're really trying to work to get nationally. We have worked with our partners from Alberta, Manitoba, and British Columbia. We now have the Maritimes on side with it as well. We're just, I don't know where it's at now with the current federal government. I know it's just Ontario and Quebec that have to come inside. And then we have a national program, and we need all 10 jurisdictions to get that. And hopefully we can get that as a national program as well. And we also ensure that that our native grasslands are staying with the primary producer, with the ranching sector. They're the best custodians of that land. You'll see a lot of the Crown land has easements on it where if it's native prairie, we have over 6 million acres of what we call native prairie grass in the province of Saskatchewan that is really being cared for. And I'll use that word very graciously, as being very well cared for by the ranching community. We want to ensure that it stays that way. And in most cases, that land has easements on it that it can't be broken. It can only be utilized for livestock use. So we see that side. As far as the grains and oilseed side, obviously we're seeing amalgamations of farms, and that is going that way. That's economy of scale. I'm a farmer, been a farmer all my life. I've sold some land. I rent some land out now to this day, and you'll continue to see that happening in the province of Saskatchewan. But I'm very proud of the farming community in the province of Saskatchewan. We've integrated and adopted new technologies that we are world leaders, and we are showing that in our carbon footprint and everything we grow in the province of Saskatchewan. We are #1 in the world for growing, for our carbon footprint and growing just about every crop that we grow in the province of Saskatchewan. And that is spreading obviously to our friends in Alberta, Manitoba, and into the Midwest United States as well, where we're starting to see more continuous cropping and crop rotations.
So Oregon has a longstanding land use system where we work to protect our working lands, our agricultural lands, and really our best soils, and keeping those in blocks for some of that efficiency for production. But I think the other thing that's newer that we're seeing more of in terms of implementation are agricultural easements, and thinking about how you transfer agricultural lands from one generation to another, where you basically producers are paid to take away the rights for development to keep that ag land in ag land. And it helps to hold the price down for entry for those newer farmers to come in. We have a program called the Oregon Ag Heritage Program. It's not in the Department of Agriculture, it's at the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, but it really is about protection of working lands, which leads me to my third one. A full recognition coming. I serve as part of the governor's Natural Resources Cabinet. And really among those cabinet members in Oregon, we're proud of our land, our water, our green spaces, and what we do for natural resources. But we're recognizing the linkage between agricultural lands, productive lands, and what they do for clean water, what they do for fish and wildlife, how important it is to have that interconnectivity, and how we work together instead of it being one versus the other. More opportunities to bring those things together for the benefit of all.
Yeah, so we have a farmland preservation program as well. The problem is that those programs tend to unravel once farmers are, in financial problems and they're getting out of the business. It just unravels. It's you can't force people to continue farming. So, and you can't force the next generation to come back to the farm and farm either if they look at their parents and see that they're struggling and not, that things are just not going well. So, I mean, we've got a real problem there, a practical problem there in terms of how do you make farmland preservation meaningful? And again, we're working on it from the standpoint of trying to make the case for rural Washington, make the case for our farmers and the support needed for them. From an industry standpoint, though, we tend to be somewhat fragmented, and that's, there's 21 commodity commissions in Washington. So there's an apple commission, a potato commission, and so on. And they tend to represent their own interests, but it's hard to get them together and coalesce around a set of principles and a set of policies they can advocate for. Closest thing we have to that is Farm Bill. I mean, we do generally get broad support for Farm Bill programs from those different industry sectors. Examples, market access program, very important to us because we trade so much. But also the specialty crop research initiatives and the specialty crop block grant programs, the commodity support, margin support programs, and crop insurance. So they will tend to coalesce around that. But as soon if you get a farm bill across the finish line, then it's sort of like, okay, we'll come back in 4 years and revisit this, So I get from an on the ground standpoint, again, I'm just struggling in terms of how we do a better job of communicating to urban Washington state about what the farms need and what the local rural area needs are. Thank you.
Anyway, I'll just comment on that question a little bit as well. I think that trade missions at the provincial and state level are very useful. If you can find, if you are sitting in Japan and you're going to buy European French fries or Canadian or US French fries, and you have representatives of that state sitting in front of you, you're more likely to buy the US French fries, right? So trade missions really help out a lot. As we're looking at our global distribution as a company, for example, if you wanted to ship French fries from the United States or Canada to Thailand, for example, right? The duty rate is 30%. To go and import those French fries in there. If you're going to ship it from China or from Australia, it's 0%. So free trade agreements have a dramatic difference in where things go. So you can see how the trade agreements will really go and put certain countries at a disadvantage for ag products. So if you do have the opportunity to communicate with the federal government on supporting new trade agreements or trade deals, as they're currently called in the White House. Certainly look for those opportunities to support them.
Well, kind of building on that, and I know we've touched on this during the conference and other sessions, but obviously a lack of farmland, and we're not going to have as much land as we have now in the future, and that's going to be a bigger challenge. So technology, all those factors are going to play into that. But how might some of these new technologies, especially AI, affect the agriculture sector in our region over the next decade or so? Who has some thoughts on that? Who wants to bring out the crystal ball? Who wants to explain to me what AI is? Yeah, that's not what I'm looking for. Any thoughts?
I would probably take a
Just take a stab at it. Yeah.
I think we all kind of have our own perception of how AI is going to affect us in the future. One of the things I think maybe most governments are grappling with is really tight budgets these days. And I'm thinking that there is an opportunity for AI to help us with outreach to the agriculture sector on maybe a type of extension services that AI can be used for. We're not there yet in British Columbia, but these are all opportunities, I think, for us to figure out how we can serve our constituents better with information, and AI might have a role to play there.
I don't think I can add too much to that as a retired farmer, that's for sure. I've just seen, I mean, I've seen this transition over even the last 5 years has been absolutely mind blowing to see where the technology has gone to what the equipment that an operator has on his tractor, his combine today, and how he can transfer that data from his tractor to his combine and from his combine to his tractor to the drill, all of it, whether it's fertilizer placement, whether it's where it's needed, and all of it. And now we're even seeing where, you know, we're seeding in rows of 10-inch or 12-inch spacings in the province of Saskatchewan, where now they're seeding between the rows. It's incredible, and we're seeing intercropping, and we're seeing new technologies. It's amazing. We're seeing robotics, we're seeing drones. It's amazing where the technology's gone in the ag sector, and they really got to be commended. That whole ag tech and the way they're moving on things is amazing. Even in irrigation, we're seeing massive expansion in that side of the province of Saskatchewan, and the water usage is really not going up by much because of the new technology in irrigation, where one part of the pivot can shut off and because that doesn't need water. It's incredible. So we're finding that, and I'm really excited about where agriculture is going to go in the next 5 to 10 years. We'll continue to grow more, and we'll continue to feed the world as it grows as well. We will.
So I think this notion of information sharing, in Oregon, agriculture is incredibly diverse. We're diverse in terms of our topography. We're diverse in terms of our crops. We're just as diverse in terms of our farmers. About 69% of the farmers in Oregon are 49 acres or less. About 90% overall are 500 acres or less. So, you know, do that footprint. So part of the idea of AI and your point about information sharing and extension, it's meeting people where they're at and providing more accessibility to information. When you have that much diversity, you need all the tools you can get, right? To help people meet them where they're at, to meet their goals. Because if you've been to a farm, you've been to one farm, and each of them are very, very different. So I think there's a great deal of opportunity there. And it goes along with the precision agriculture. You know, how do we best use precision agriculture when you're talking about more of that at scale, larger scale productions, to help in terms of more efficiency in terms of water? We've all talked about it. Water and inputs are incredibly important. And so how do you control those and minimize the use, but maximize the outputs?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add. I mean, I just want to say that, I mean, obviously agriculture is becoming increasingly data-driven. There's tons and tons of data being collected. It's how that information gets analyzed and how that gets translated into changes in practices. That's the important piece, and that's where the AI piece fits in. So we're again very engaged in it. It's fascinating to see, you know, go on some of the experimental farms and that sort of thing where these new technologies are being employed. But we have a ways to go again in terms of making those useful to quote the average farmer, you know. So but again, a great amount of progress being made in that arena.
Maybe we could ask AI to solve the trade issue.
I don't think AI could handle that question. Don't ask Grok that one, that's for sure. But I really want to thank all of the panelists. A big round of applause for all of them. They did a great job.